All right. Let's look at test two. So questions 1 and 3. Question 1, you had to make use of the example being given to you and at least one other relevant example. So here you had female labor force participation and you had fast food consumption here. So you had to start off by defining leisure. So what is leisure? What do we know it as? Then go on to discuss the conceptual imprecision of the full income budget constraint. Then address the limitation within a purely choice theoretic framework through the incorporation of full price and household production concepts into the model. Then go on to show the explanation meeting the discipline of thoroughness. So you'd get your mark by talking about why there's a conceptual imprecision, because much time spent not working is for like basically chores, you would say. Like just because you are not at work does not mean there's leisure. You get what I'm saying? So it's important to bear that in mind. So you get your mark there. An example that was used here, chores, which is I think an easy example in contrast to others, but yeah, that's the one you use. So you define what leisure is first, and then you talk about conceptual imprecision, you know? Then moving on to the second point, you had to discuss household production. So reconceptualizing leisure as time spent in household production. This is where you look at page 140. Then you talk about the different activities as goods produced by the consumer. So a meal, clean clothes, etc. You get your other mark for this. Then talking about the full price. So you won't get the mark by just saying full price. Okay, what about full price? You get what I'm saying? So based on that, you have to talk about the time and money price of different goods. That's where you get your mark. Then you're required to explain the case in full. So, as women's wages have increased, the full price of money intensive goods like fast food has decreased relative to that of the time intensive good. So, they're simply cheaper in price terms and make economic sense for. So, there's economic sense for women to work in the labor market, earn wages, and buy money intensive goods like fast food, appliances, anything that money can buy. So you get 2 marks for this full explanation, convincing us exactly how you understand the question in your answer. Remember, what you are saying, you are selling to the marker. So when you do say things, remember, if you're going to say it's just you need to have evidence. So point, evidence, and explanation is something I need to emphasize. Then thoroughness is another point where you are required to you're required to acknowledge that you have explained various observations like the labor force participation and change in pattern of consumption of various money and time intensive goods. So the concept of money and time intensive goods feeds into the definition of what a full price is. So there you are showing us that you fully understand what's happening in the question. So these observations that have been explained were purely in terms of changes in economic factors. So in this case, a wage, and this would be where you get your 1 mark. It is important to bear that in mind. Are there any questions thus far? No questions. All right, cool. All right, moving right along, we can go to 1B and explain why it is necessary to depart from a strictly choice theoretic framework to fully explain your examples. In the test, I've come across a whole lot of it's necessary or it's not necessary. Yes, then what? You get what I'm saying? So be able to feed the marker, show them that, okay, this is what's going on. This is why it's going on. So here we have a following explanation. We have the following explanation. We cannot assume that the behavior we observe reflects choice. So if women are not working, this does not mean that they prefer leisure or even that it is optimal for them to engage in household production. Similarly, if people are working rather than taking care of kids, this might not reflect that they prefer this. So they behave a certain way, but it does not mean that they are true, like there's a choice based on leisure. So if women are not working, it doesn't mean that, oh no, they're just chilling, you know? So it's important to bear that in mind. People may have no choice or may face dilemmas or exploitation. So, for example, when they face unemployment, you're looking for work and you're stuck at home. There's nothing you can do, you know. So we are talking about a violation of assumption here on page 61. So this manifests as incompleteness and may lead or might lead to apparently irrational or dependent behavior. Then for question 2, you're gonna have to look at Prof. Mutambara's video. So remember, it's just one thing to have a memo which you're not gonna get. It's another when you have the video and you are watching the video and you're writing notes down. You can pause, fast forward, rewind. So engaging with the video is better. You get. Then for this question, you had to look at, I think, is it compliments? Yeah, compliments. Imagine that the price of maize meal increases and a poor family is observed to consume the same amount of maize meal but less meat. So can this observation be explained in terms of maize meal and meat being complements? Yes or no? Explain fully. As you may know, maize meal and meat are a common combination, but we need to be realists in our explanation. So we are saying false because if the price of maize meal increases, but we are consuming the same amount of maize meal, obviously meat will be less because maybe the money that we were spending on maize meal initially, we were able to buy some meat, but now we need to buy less because we are still consuming the same amount with a price increase. So it cannot be explained as a complement because a complement is a good for which demand for Y increases as X increased. So here we can see that X hasn't increased. The good has in fact stayed the same. So this would be explained by an income effect. And how you do this, you explain it as follows. The price of X increases, which then leads to a decrease in real income. As a result, there's a decrease in the consumption of meat, indicating that meat is a normal good or a luxury good. It is important to note that X is not a given good in this case, and a given good is one in which X increases as the price of X increases. The question specifies that X stays the same. The explanation about the income effect is similar, however, but with a given good, the income effect is strong enough to dominate the substitution effect for good X. So it is important to bear that in mind. See page 160 of the handout. And yeah, that is question 3A. Let's move on to question B, where you have a government wanting to assist the family so that their well-being is not impacted by the maize meal price increase and is considering whether a cash payment or food parcel will be better. So you're required to discuss the debate in relation to the Hicksian and Slutsky definitions of the compensating variation and the difference between the utilitarian and rights-based approach. So see page 170, 172, and lecture 6.4. Also notice the connection to the essay. The BIG is a cash payment. One of the worries is that it will replace not only other cash grants, but in-kind welfare. So understanding what in-kind means in the context of welfare. In particular, it might end up with the state spending less on public goods like education, healthcare, infrastructure, policing, and justifying this on utilitarian grounds. So it's better to give people money and let them decide with their money. And before I go any further, just an important point I want to raise. These sentences right here, may you please write them in full for the exam, because the exam will come through and the markers are going to want to see full explanations. So when you refer to RI, say real income instead. Don't use this arrow in the sentences. Just basically come up with words to say, because the price of X, good X increased, this will result in a decrease in real income, which will also lead to, just making a explanation out of words. So the key here is getting on the one hand, so we're going back to this question. So the key here is getting on the one hand, or getting the connection between the Hicksian approach, utilitarianism, and giving people cash payments. So understanding the connection between those three. And on the other hand, we have the critique of utilitarianism and the alternative rights-based approach and its connection with giving people goods instead of money. and the Slutsky compensation variation. So the utilitarian logic is that people are utility maximizers. They know what is best for themselves. In other words, what gives them utility. So if we are worried about their well-being, we should give them cash and let them decide. So concerning ourselves with what people consume interferes with their choice. That's what you need to bear in mind, you know. Then if we wanted to restore their full income so that the price increase did not hurt them, we would then use the Higgsian approach. Give them enough money to get them back to their old level of utility, even if they could no longer afford the original bundle. The criticism of this is the rights-based approach and links to giving the food parcel and Slutsky compensation variation. If the price of some important good like meat goes up, people will tend to substitute away from it or may not be able to afford it at all. This may have negative consequences or for people affected by the decision. It is important to bear in mind that when you are explaining something like saying, if the price of some important good or a good goes up, people will tend to substitute away from it. Sure, or may not be able to afford it at all. Sure, that's what you're telling us in terms of economic theory. But if you give an example, you will really add weight to the answer, you know, so it's important to just dive deep into the answer. Yeah, then for example, if the price of meat went up and the government gave people a bit of money, they might cut back on meat nevertheless, which would have adverse effects on their children's nutrition. We are challenging the underlying assumption that people can and do always make optimal choices. For example, you can buy something unnecessarily. You can like buy steers and debonaires in one day just because, and then regret it the following day, you know, just to show that people do not make choices of best benefit, you know. So understand the following. Understand the following. The logic is to restore Higgsian real income and then link that to cash payment. So the preference of people being given cash, you know. Then the criticism of the utilitarian approach, just giving cash, for example, is that people might not be able to achieve a minimum amount of necessities. Yeah, necessities like food, or they might make bad choices if they're just given cash, which went back to what I just said now. The rights-based approach would support giving them food. The idea is getting back to the original bundle. The criticism of the rights-based approach is giving people a food parcel that is paternalistic. In other words, we are not allowing people to choose and are trying to decide what is good for them. So you're allowing the people to make decisions. Any questions? All right. Then with the essay, I'll just briefly touch on it because what I have are just the nitty-gritties that need to be followed. So in essence, what you need to do is just you're supposed to like understand the whole debate that was being had. So the big debate, the basic income grant debate, that is knowing what it entails. Do you have a question?
Hi, Butlale. Thank you very much. Everything makes sense now. I was available on the second part when you were explaining the essay part. We can just skip it. I attended this part.
Also, so you already know about the essay. Okay,
Yes,
no problem.
yes.
Okay,
Okay.
if that's the case, then that will be the end of the Zoom. If there are any questions, you let me know. And all the best for the examination.
Okay, thank you very much.